Welcome to Taking the Higher Road, a podcast by DriverReach in partnership with FreightWaves. I'm your host, Jeremy Raymer, founder of DriverReach, a modern software solution at the intersection of recruiting and compliance. With over 20 years in the trucking industry, both on the carrier side as well as the vendor side, I bring a wealth of expertise around all things recruiting, retention, and compliance. On this show, I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insights to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges, from recruitment and retention to the realm of regulatory compliance. Your positive feedback always keeps us motivated. Don't forget to rate and review Taking the Higher Road, whatever platform you use to listen. This week, I'm excited to be joined by a great industry friend, Michael Precia, the CEO and president of Fleet Safety and Risk Management System, Fleetworthy Solutions. So glad to have you on the show, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
So you've got over 25 years of experience in the industry. Fleetworthy Solutions is one of DriverReach's trusted partners. I'm excited to have you share your background with the audience, how you got into the industry, why you decided to stick around. And I'd like to learn more about Fleetworthy and how the company has evolved over the years. We'll also answer a question from a listener during our deeper dive segment. Does that all work?
Sounds like a plan.
Awesome. All right. Well, as is the custom, before we dive in, I'm curious if you have any book recommendations for the audience. Anything recent you've read that was impactful to you?
So, Jeremy, you know me well. I'm kind of a simpleton. So, we often hand books out inside the organization. And if you come into Fleetworthy, you'll see a book by Dr. Seuss all over the office, all the places you'll go. It was a gift that was given to me by at the time, my sensei in martial arts when I graduated from college. And, at first glance, it looked like a children's book. But as I've, gone through life, it really hits home in regards to the things that you go through in life and the things you have to focus on to be successful. So easy read, but, I give it away as a gift all the time and, highly recommend that people read it. I read it every day.
So your point is you teach them young, right? These are concepts, in that book and probably a lot of other books that our children read that, we need to take a look at and go, oh my God, this is so foundational, so fundamental, and it applies to life in general. We didn't even realize we were teaching them.
Exactly. And as busy as we are, I try to give people quick reads, things that make you smile, make you sit back and go, I knew that inside myself that this is the way you should handle tough situations. So some people think it's corny, but great book. Highly recommend it.
It just reminded me before we move on, I'll add, there's a quote that I'm sort of pondering recently that I think really is important to me and relating to children. And that is, it's easier to raise strong children than to fix a broken man.
Yep.
And I really like that because I think that's the whole point of that, right? It's that the foundational, it's foundational to get them, give them good education and teach them young, and then they become like us, hopefully.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So take us back, if you would, to the beginning of your career, 25 plus years ago when you got into the industry. How did that come about?
Yeah. So, I don't have as much transportation, experience as you do. I joined Fleetworthy about 7 years ago. Actually, just my anniversary was a few weeks ago, but I spent, many, many years in supply chain, software, both, behind the firewall software and, software as a service, and had a lot of transportation clients, both for hire and in private fleets. And on my last journey professionally, I was looking for an opportunity to find a company headquartered in Wisconsin. I'd worked for companies headquartered all over the U.S. and the globe, and I was interested in finding, an opportunity to help a company here in my backyard. And I came across ITS Compliance, formerly ITS Compliance. We did a brand change and changed to Fleetworthy Solutions. But, I just felt that transportation, as an industry is one of those last foundating type industries in the U.S., and gives every person the ability to start their own business, be part of the U.S. supply chain. And I was excited to join Fleetworthy and try to morph the company iteratively, to scale it the way we thought we could.
Well, I think we both acknowledge that trucking, first of all, it's an amazing industry, great industry, build great relationships with people. It's very, as big as it is, it's also very tight and close. And we'll kind of touch on that in a little bit, but it's also deficient in the adoption of technology in certain aspects of it. And we're talking specifically here around recruiting, compliance, and so on. And I think you recognize that as well. That probably, was a motivator for you to get into the space.
The interesting thing to me as I started, visiting, carriers of all sizes, and you'll know, what I'm referring to when you walk into these carriers headquarters, and a lot of them have the timeline, that it started with one truck, maybe a farmer that was moving something and bought a truck and asked friends, can I haul things from you? And one truck turns to 5 trucks, turn to 15 trucks. And very interesting to see kind of these stories of, the American dream of starting really small and growing. And, at some point in the industry, it kind of flipped. So you look at a truck and the technology and how fast the technology is moving. And then you go back to these same carriers at their headquarters, and they're way behind from a technology perspective, spreadsheets, green screen, older systems. And it's, how do we help the carrier keep up with the speed of which technology is changing in the cab, so that they can maintain compliance and all the regulatory pressure, as efficiently as we're seeing the changes in the trucks themselves. And that's really where Fleetworthy, sits. It's, how can we help you, keep up with the ever-changing regulatory landscape, injecting technology and a staff that can be an extension of your compliance team to keep up with all the changing rules and regulations.
Well, you mentioned regulatory pressure, and it seems to be increasing over the years. And we, certainly in scope of, I was on ATRI's Research Advisory Committee for a couple of years, and during that period of time is when we launched is in 2020, when we launched the nuclear verdicts and settlement report that they come out. And I know that you know that report probably really, really well, because it shows on, you see one of the slides, it shows the trajectory of around 2017, the exponential leap in nuclear verdicts and settlements. And it's obviously, we've got bullseye on our side of our trailer or on our back, or wherever you want to say, as an industry. And so it's so important. I mean, and so I think we both know that. But Fleetworthy Solutions, you actually quote, take your fleet past the point of bare minimum to go beyond compliant. Maybe you can elaborate on how you make that happen and how you're helping companies, really avert that significant risk that they're really under fire right now.
Yeah, that that the industry is highly regulated. That's a given. And we tell our customers, if you're just doing the minimum, if you're just getting by, right, or you're just being reactive to, if the FMCSA knocks on the door and you scramble to try to prepare for an audit, you're only one incident away from those nuclear verdicts that you're talking about. So we're trying to help with not only technology, but your optimization team that becomes an extension of a safety department. Is let's make sure we put rigor around how we approach compliance. And we want to build this moat around our customers that, when an accident occurs, it's just that, it's an accident. It's not negligence. It's not because we don't care. And then we want to give them the breadcrumbs, the supporting information, the meaningful, actionable data, so that they can prove to anyone, whether it's an auditor or it's a jury, that, hey, we take compliance very seriously, and you can see that we're doing everything available to us to make sure that we're helping make the roads safer, make sure that our drivers get home safely. And, I think attorneys have figured out a way to make people forget that person that's in the cab is a man or a woman that's trying to get home to their families, trying to make a living. They're not getting into a vehicle with the intent to hurt someone. But unfortunately, if you can't prove that in regards to the way that you're managing compliance, that's the direction these conversations go.
Well, and on top of that, I think you made the attorneys know where to look, right? The plaintiff's attorneys know where to look. They know where those deficiencies might be from a compliance perspective, and they can hone in and find that right away. So I think being in a position to help leverage technology to ensure that's prevented is important. Because one of the other slides on that same report, one of the other tables references, there are really, when it comes to nuclear verdicts and settlements, there are two areas of exposure, right? One of them is the behavior in the driver, how they behave, if they're, talking on their cell phone or whatever. Obviously, that's an issue. But the other is, DQ file compliance related. And those are things that are 100% in the control of the company if they just get it right and ensure that they're, checking the boxes and doing those things. So that's something I think you and I are really aligned on, because it's so important and it's so preventable.
Yes. And it's the place that you can show the most muscle memory in regards to the diligence you do to make sure that you're running a compliant, safe carrier. And that's one of the primary things that we help carriers with.
So you talked earlier about the evolution and how you've grown, and from a vision standpoint, can you elaborate on or I should say, you've acquired some companies, right, over the years. Could you share maybe how the acquisitions have shaped and evolved your approach, your services, technologies to meet the changing needs of the industry and to your clients?
So, when we started in business, we've been in business for 40 years, where we have our 40th anniversary celebration end of this month. So we started in business before a lot of these technologies were available, before the government was able to, grab this data and actually use it as an indication of whether you're, running your carrier in a compliant way, in a responsible way or not. So over the years, because we started when it was kind of being deregulated and owner operators were starting to compete with larger fleets. And as we needed to scale, we built technology based on the reality of day-to-day working in as a carrier. And when I came here, we were at the inflection point of taking that technology that we were using ourselves to be an extension of our customers' safety departments, and we moved it in front of us and said, hey, we want to create a single pane of glass that you can go to and really get a 360-degree view of how you're doing, both on the driver side and how you're managing the compliance of your assets. And, and it was built from the reality of the day-to-day, hurdles that a carrier, whether it's a real large carrier or an owner-operator, has to go through to maintain compliance. So now we've morphed that to we have the ability to allow people to use that technology as a standalone solution that they use, or they can wrap our managed services, our compliance team around that, and we become a extension of their safety department, give them more bench strength in regards to subject matter expertise and so on.
Well, some companies, this is sadly, in some cases, companies, you can provide the technology, sort of how you're the reference to leading a horse to water. But sometimes when you lead them to water, they just drown. They don't know what to do. They need your help. They need your expertise. So from a services perspective, I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's what you have so much expertise in. And so as an extension, I think that's a value add for sure. Do you, I know from a partnership standpoint, I mentioned up at the top of the show that Fleetworthy Solutions is a trusted partner of Driver Reach. And I think collaboration is key in this industry. There are a number of technology providers that really work well together, that they play really well together. I've heard from other people that other customers of ours and a few of our other integrated partners say things like, you're one of the good guys, you're the Avengers, they've said. And I'm pretty sure you can't say that. I'm pretty sure that's copyrighted or trademarked or whatever. But we acknowledge that collaboration is key. And I'm just, if you could share maybe, how does Fleetworthy Solutions collaborate with other industry players like Driver Reach to enhance the overall experience for your customers and address their specific needs?
Yeah. So, we know what we want to be best in the world at. And that's really, as I said, helping carriers make sure that they go beyond the minimum steps of compliance and make sure that they're safe from a compliance perspective. And then we look at best of breed, next door vendors like Driver Reach that do things that feed the our compliance engine, but it's not something we want to go really into, right? So, while you're zeroing in on the importance of driver recruiting and the fact that driver turnover is a huge issue in the industry, we're saying, and once you do that, we want to make sure we bring that driver on, they drive safely, they have a long career with you as a carrier, you keep your good drivers, and then you have a fortified process both technologically and service so that you don't have to worry about not passing an audit or a nuclear verdict, negatively impacting your business. So we prefer, having a band of brothers from a partnership perspective when we go into our customers. And over the years, they've trusted us if we bring a vendor into their four walls with us, they know, okay, Fleetworthy has vetted, this vendor, and they're on a mission to do what Fleetworthy is, which is to take us beyond just the minimum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's well said. And Band of Brothers, I like that. That's another one. Pretty sure that's also copyrighted or trademark. But I think the importance there is what we're kind of talking about is really being the best in class in your area of expertise, and then partnering and working closely with others who also work and operate around that driver life cycle, and being committed to the industry, as I also said at the top. The relationships that you build and the network that you have. We all know people do business with people they know and trust. And so you and I see at events all the time throughout the year, you and your team, you always have a presence. How important would you say, those events are, and how important do you think it is in this industry to establish trust through building relationships?
I think it's hugely important. We always talk about that, the difference of this industry is there's a high percent of science, we know when the driver license expires and things, but as you know, there's a lot of art, right? So, the concept of driver recruiting sounds easy, right? But when you sprinkle on regulatory rules and all the things, there's this art of how do you interact with that human being that's trying to move on or bring on a new job. The science of it's easy. It's the art that people don't understand that makes this complicated. So I'm always looking for partners that when I say that, they get it, so, it's the understanding of that and finding vendors that know that it's not easy. It's not an easy task. It causes real easy conversations when things are great, but it causes hard conversations when, you're pointing out you've got a risk here. And, as your vendor who's trying to take you to that point of, you have a motor on you, we got to have these hard discussions about things that you're not doing, per the regs, and things that are, causing risk, right? And sometimes that's not convenient. Sometimes it adds time. Sometimes it adds a little pain. But ultimately, when you get discipline, the fruits of the labor is, a safe haven for your drivers, your assets, and protecting your brand.
Well, now, looking forward, again, you've acquired companies over the years. Are there any emerging technologies or trends that you believe will significantly impact the industry? And if so, any thoughts on how Fleetworthy might be preparing to adapt or leverage these advancements? I know you just had a private equity meeting, stuff like that. So I don't know if there's any. I don't know if you can say anything, but if there's anything that you're seeing that's emerging that you think you're wanting to channel some energy towards.
So I think we recognize that jurisdiction after jurisdiction is starting to lean towards accepting electronic credentials and moving away from paper and all those things. And we feel that in order to do that, you do have to have some sort of, single version of the truth or a single pane of glass where all this data resides, so that you can leverage the nimbleness that's being created by this morphing of, hey, we're moving from a paper-based, country to electronic and so on. So, we are, I think, positioned really well to morph as the industry does and as the governmental agencies change. So we think that's important. We're keeping an eye on electric vehicles. How does that trickle down to changes in IFTA and fuel tax? The states are going to have to monetize it some way. And if fossil fuel is going away and electric is coming in, how is that going to change everything, right? So we're just trying to be kind of in that vortex of all the things that are happening and being ahead of it, leveraging technology we can, but never losing track of the human aspect of this industry. So I think we're positioned well to be able to respond to the changes.
Well, you mentioned adapting, out of the paper-based, kind of. I had to get a notary. I had to get something notarized the other day, and I thought, why do we still need to do this? They must have some lobbying group on the Hill, Capitol Hill, who keeps them in business, because the concept of that is just mind numbing to me, that I've got to go way out of my way. I got to pay a fee to have somebody. I mean, come on, we do electronic signatures all the time for pretty big things. This was insignificant, yet it required a notary.
So it's funny you mentioned that. We actually are testing different ways to handle that whole notary process, right? And in different pockets of different industries, you're starting to see people like, do things electronically, video-wise for notarizing. And that's always things that we have to be aware of because, on the asset side and even on the driver side, the last mile of dependency are DMVs, that are kind of lagging from a technology perspective. But we want to be ready when they can start kind of moving to modern business.
Yes, exactly. Last question, and this is our deeper dive question where we answer a question from one of our listeners. The question is, it's getting challenging for smaller and medium-sized fleets out there. What are some competitive ways we can remain in business and lean into these challenging times? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so for us, you remember we cut our teeth in the beginning of our, evolution as a company, working with owner-operators, helping them, how do you scale to do all these things that now that you are a carrier, you have authority, how are you going to take, care of all the different things that you can and operate your business? Because a lot of times they're actually driving the trucks themselves. So the reason we built CP Suite, our latest platform, is so that carriers of all sizes can leverage the knowledge, the 40 years of knowledge that we have technologically, and have an entry point from a cost perspective that, it's not prohibitive for them to use this type of technology. And now all of a sudden, you can be a small carrier, but you can run your carrier just like the biggest of the big carriers are running it. And then leverage our staff if you need help. And as you grow and scale, we can grow and scale with you. That's our suggestion.
So your point is you can help them operate efficiently and certainly safer in a position to reduce the risk that they have otherwise. And that's significant. There was somebody, Brian Fielko, a good friend, I think of both of ours, once told me that was sort of the secret sauce for him at his previous company at Jetco. He said, we were so good from a safety and compliance standpoint, from a culture, that we were more profitable. We had a better reputation, and that helped to get us business. And it was like the secret sauce that just not enough people were really embracing. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's the secret sauce.
Yep.
Well, thanks for joining me for another episode of Taking the High Road and for spreading the word to your industry peers. We really appreciate it. Remember, you could submit any questions or comments, including those which may appear on upcoming deeper dive segments at podcast@driverreach.com. And don't forget to rate and review Taking the High Road, whatever platform you use to listen. Until next time, Mike, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for taking the higher road.